Great to have you with us on WPR News, Larry Mealer. And today we begin the show by talking about our first book club book selection of the year. It's a novel, and its title is The Snowbirds. And really pleased to have the author with us today, Christina Clancy. She's also a former English professor. She taught at Beloit College. Christina has a PhD in creative writing from UW-Milwaukee. And she has some other books as well. Her works include Shoulder Season and another, The Second Home. And, of course, her latest is The Snowbirds. She splits her time between Madison and Palm Springs, two pretty good places, I think, to split your time. Well, we'll find out about that as we talk with her. And as we do talk with her, I hope you'll join in. Did you have time to read the book? It's just recently released. If you did, I hope you'll join in with your thoughts and comments. And also, let's talk about travel. Well, tell us where you love to travel when Wisconsin winter gets cold. And this book is about relationships. So maybe you could talk about what's kept you and your partner together all these years. Give us a call. The number is 800-642-1234, 1-800-642-1234, or send an email to talk@wpr.org. That's talk@wpr.org. Christina Clancy, welcome. Thank you for taking time to be with us today.
Thank you so much for having me on the program. I'm a listener, and I've learned so much from you over the years about birds and bikes and books and bugs and gardening. So thanks. It's an honor to be on.
Well, and your book's just out. I mean, it's a month or less.
Not even.
Not
Yeah,
even.
it's been, about 3 weeks. It hit the USA Today bestseller list 2 weeks in a row, which is really exciting. So we're off and running.
Well, I enjoyed the book. And for those who, obviously, lots of people listening today have not had a chance to read the book. So maybe start by giving us a brief description of what The Snowbirds is about.
Sure. Well, it's actually about a pair of snowbirds. And for those who you had mentioned in the intro that snowbirds are people who spend their winter somewhere else and somewhere warmer. This is about a couple, Grant and Kim. They have never been married, even though they've been together for 30 years. And they've reached kind of a point in their relationship. Their kids are grown. Grant has recently lost his job at the small liberal arts college that just closed, like Northland College that they just announced.
Yeah.
And then he and Kim has a work sabbatical from her job. She wants to go somewhere warm. She does not like winter. Grant doesn't mind it at all. And so they decide to go to Palm Springs for the winter as a compromise. And Kim's ex-husband, Basil, is gay, and he has this fabulous condo that he's offered them to use. And they get to Palm Springs. And when they're there, they meet a number of different people who give them a kaleidoscopic view of their relationship. And they're working on themselves, trying to figure out their own identities, their own futures. And also they're trying to decide if they should stay together. They get into an argument. And one day, Grant, who is tend to have emotional walkabouts when he gets upset, decides to go for a solo hike, and he doesn't return. And they've just had an argument, and Kim isn't sure if he's left her or if he might truly be lost on a hike. And the more she learns about what happens to missing hikers, the scarier that option becomes.
I loved how you've organized the book because, we've got some high adventure here going on throughout the book. And so we get a chapter, maybe two, of that, kind of what's going on. But then you use the rest of the time wisely to talk about their relationship together over the years.
Yeah, it was hard. I wanted originally to just have the story move forward and have it be a missing hiker adventure and see how to do that. But when you're working on a story about a couple that's been together for a long time, you realize that you just can't move forward without going backwards and exploring what's happened in their past and what sort of like wounds they've suffered and scars they have and the joys and delights and what their meet cute was. So I just decided to intersperse some of the chapters with their background.
I love that aspect of the book, as a matter of fact. And you've picked out an excerpt that you would be willing to read for us. And I saw what you picked ahead of time, so I know what's coming. But please go ahead.
Oh, sure. Well, this is Kim is trying to convince Grant to go to Palm Springs, and he's not really sure about it. So it starts out with Kim saying to Grant, "We can live in the same city, the same house, even. We can be a normal couple. We can finally be us." But that was the problem. I wasn't sure what us meant after spending so much time apart. "We'll be together all winter, Grant. I think adventure is going to be amazing." "Does this really qualify as an adventure?" he asked. "It's fairly conventional to spend a winter away. If you can afford it, that is. We pretty much know exactly what to expect. Sun, palm trees, a pool, old people in golf carts. Warmth. The cold reminds you that you're alive. So did my broken ankle from slipping on ice." He said, "Isn't it shallow to want to go somewhere just because of the weather?" "Shallow?" I groaned. "I'm tired of shoveling and scraping ice off the windshield with a credit card. The wind feels like rocks in my face." "I like the cold. I mean, I don't just like it, I love it. My spirit animal is a Siberian husky." "My spirit animal is a lizard basking in the sun." We just left home and already I felt an argument coming on. "Grant, I hate winter. I mean, I really, really hate it. Doesn't it matter to you that all these years I've been miserable?" Hadn't he seen me walking around the house in my fuzzy wearable blanket? Hadn't he seen my face lit up by a happy lamp in the depths of February? You know what? I was feeling more passionate about this subject than ever. I'd be fine if I never saw another snowflake for the rest of my life. I tried to put a positive lilt in my voice so we wouldn't fight. "Maybe you'll discover that you like escaping the cold. Look at all the celebrities who go to Palm Springs. Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt." "Ooh, Brad Pitt, whoop-de-doo." I'm just saying that I don't know why you're making me go to the desert. You could have stayed back. It was your choice to say no. Not if I wanted to be with you."
Yeah, and that was a great piece to select. It does highlight many of the discussions that they had over time, and they were quite realistic. I mean, the conversation between couples.
Yeah, I kind of wondered what happens with couples when one person doesn't like the cold and the other one does. It's a kind of fundamental disagreement. And when when Grant asks, "Isn't it shallow to choose weather?" I started to wonder, is it shallow? I think as your life becomes more free, when your kids are grown and you can choose to be somewhere else and you have that option, if you feel like you'd be a different person in warm weather and you'd be happier in warm weather, what happens to a relationship when there's no agreement there?
Yeah. Well, it was really realistic. Your conversations, and I wondered at the time. Well, I remember right in the start of the book, you have a very lovely shout out to your spouse, your partner.
Oh,
And
right. Yeah.
so you guys get along.
We do. My husband's great. And in fact, I say in the acknowledgments that I thank him for making the book so difficult for me to write, because my husband is a very, very agreeable person. He's just lovely and really sweet. And, but stories are made up and literature comes from trouble. So when I was first working on the book, I spent a lot of time trying to find couples that had lots of issues that were different, but I didn't want to have an affair. I just felt
Yeah.
like there have been so many stories about affairs. So I was trying to think, well, what sorts of issues do other couples have? So I landed on this idea of this couple that spent a lot of time doing separate things, because it just kind of accentuates what happens in life when you're so busy with your regular life. You're doing things, you're raising your kids, you're busy with your work. And then suddenly, whether you're asking for it or not, your life totally changes and you look around and you realize that you can make a whole different set of decisions.
Yeah, very interesting. Kim, as you say, they're not married. Grant wants to get hitched,
Mm-hmm.
but Kim isn't sure what's going on in her head.
Well, Kim is someone who's very independent. She was raised by someone who really valued independence over dependency on people. Her own parents had had a very unconventional relationship. Her dad had owned a campground in northern Wisconsin, and her mom lived in Chicago, and she didn't want to spend the whole winter there. So that's kind of baked into Kim's personality, and Kim is kind of afraid to rely on Grant because he has a history of being a little bit unreliable, and it's hurt her very much. Even though in the times he's kind of taken off, it's never been for too long. It's left a really lasting impression on her, to the point where she's not sure as she gets older, can she count on Grant to be the person to take care of her in her old age? And does she want to be the person to take care of him?
Yeah, and what I found interesting, along with the relationship between the two of them, were the exes. Basil and Sasha, and the role that talk about the role that they play in their lives.
Yeah, I kind of wanted each of the characters to have a wingman, someone who they offload all of their emotions onto so that they don't have to lean on each other. So for a lot of Kim's life, she's her very best friend growing up, and the person she married is Basil. And he she just calls him whenever she has any kinds of problems or issues, and she tells him all of her deepest secrets instead of telling her own husband. And Basil's in a relationship with someone else and running around all over the world. And then Grant has an ex, Sasha, who he has a very intellectual relationship with. They're both academics. They worked on a book together. As he says, they had a sapiosexual relationship, which is like a relationship of the mind. And so Kim feels kind of excluded from that relationship. So, I think other people do enter our relationships in different ways, our friends do. And I just kind of wanted to call that out in a kind of extreme way with this couple who's really struggling to learn to lean into each other.
Yeah, and Sasha got granted the job at the college where he was teaching at, which we should say is, far enough away that he had to be gone all week while Kim raised their two children.
Right. And I found that when I was an academic that people, if you work at a college that's a ways away from a metropolitan area, a lot of times couples do live in separate cities. And so I just thought that was very realistic to write about an academic who, spends a lot of time there. And ironically, when he and Sasha were married, she never changes her name back. So they work at the college together, and they both have the last name Duffy. So everybody there thinks that Grant and Sasha are married. And, and then I kind of wanted to leave it up to the reader to wonder, like, what really goes on with Sasha and Grant.
Christina Clancy, our guest today. Her interesting novel is The Snowbirds. And I hope you'll join in with your own thoughts, questions, or comments as we move along today. How has your relationship survived 30 years? Give us a call. The number's 800-642-1234, or you can email us. The email address, talk@wpr.org. I'm Larry Mealer for WPR News. Thanks so much for joining in today on WPR News. We're talking with Christina Clancy. She is the author of the book The Snowbirds, a novel, and it's a fun read as she has Kim and Grant, who aren't married, but they've been together, and they have for a long, long time, and they have twins, daughters, and they have a chance to move to Palm Springs for, I think it was something like 6 months, something like that. And it's sort of the story of their relationship and kind of what happens to them in Palm Springs. And by the way, I'm sort of counting up in my head the number of people who have actually played sort of a major role, and I think I counted 14. And what I was really pleased about was the fact that the way you write them in and the conversations, it was easy for me to keep track of who was who.
Oh, yeah, it's an art when you're working on a book because sometimes you feel like you need one of those family diagrams, in order to keep track of everyone. So yeah, I tried to lace them in slowly. And I actually love reading a book where you're reading along and suddenly a new character comes in and it just kind of changes the dynamic of the book.
Yeah, and we'll talk about some of those characters in this book as we move along today. But Kim's the narrator, I guess you could say, of the book for the most part, most of the time, and you get, let me say, total insight into the way she thinks, and at times she can be a little frustrating. At least,
Yeah.
she's definitely not perfect.
I think most all my characters in all my books are imperfect. I know a lot of writers try to appeal to readers by having characters who are super likable. And I want my characters to be likable, but more than that, I want them to be relatable. And the kinds of people that I find relatable and interesting are kind of messy and complicated. And the other thing that was hard when I was working on the book is I realized, when you know a lot of couples, you might hear one person's side of an argument. And the more I was working on the book, I thought, if I'm telling the story from Kim's perspective, I bet Kim has some issues too that Grant could take issue with. And he doesn't get as much of a voice in it, but I needed to show that she's fallible. She's made mistakes over the years. And so I had to make her do some things that, the reader might disapprove of or find frustrating.
Well, there was a time or two in the book where Grant revealed something to her that she hadn't known in all their relationship, and so she was trying to suss out in her mind why he would not have brought that up. And she three or four things come to mind, and I'm thinking, no, you missed the main one. I think he would have thought this way. Oh man! Well, this business, a theme throughout Kim and Grant's relationship is forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that important in a long-lasting relationship?
Oh, I think you can nurture grudges in a long relationship. And, and I think it's sort of a beautiful thing when you write fiction because you always need a character to have an arc, right? Like you need your characters to change. And the more I work on fiction, the more I realize that people change. Like people in my life, in real life, not in fiction.
Yeah.
They change. They're capable of change. They can do really dumb things. And I thought about that a lot, especially with my second book, Shoulder Season, which is about a former Playboy bunny who worked at the old Playboy resort in Lake Geneva. And the whole project of that book was to write about somebody who looks back on a time in her life when she'd done a lot of dumb things. And I thought, what's it like when you're 60 to look back on the dumb things you did when you were 19 years old? Do you forgive yourself? So I hadn't thought about this until you mentioned it, but I probably carried over some of that theme into the Snowbirds.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there are several other couples in the novel. There's an older couple I kind of liked, Jean and Jeannie.
Denim and DNA.
And I also like Basil's mother, Melody, as well, as she often reflected on her late husband. What do these relationships teach? Let's put it this way: what do they teach Grant and Kim?
I think we see ourselves reflected in other people, and we see how other people see us, and it's always informative. And so I said earlier that I used that word kaleidoscopic view of their relationship. And I think each of those characters help, Jean and Jeannie have a really great relationship. They've been together a long time. They're facing troubles, but they're together. They're doing it together. They also have this wonderful attitude about life, where Jean says to Kim, you don't know how many winters you have, just be happy and enjoy the person you're with. And I think that's something that she needs to hear at that time. She's very receptive to that. And then also Melody is her ex-mother-in-law. And I have a wonderful mother-in-law. And I think it's really interesting to get to know your partner through the people who love them. And so it's really nice to have Melody's just one of those characters that I don't know where she came from, but as soon as she started speaking in my book, it was like she was just singing out of my head. Like she was so fun and easy to write. I thought actually about revising the whole book and having it be from her perspective because I liked her so much. Um, but she also, one thing that's great about Melody is she encourages Kim to think about this as a time in her life when she can reinvent herself, which a lot of people, when they reach middle age, this is a really big theme in the book. Kim is wondering, I'm middle aged, like, do I have to keep struggling and trying? I just at any point in my life, can I just relax and settle and be? And I think she finds out, no, you really like the better option is to just continue to expand and grow and embrace new challenges. And Melody is a really great mouthpiece for that.
Yeah, and Melody's living at Smoke Tree Ranch, which is an actual ranch, is it
Yeah,
not?
it's funny. The day my book came out, there was a article in the Wall Street Journal about the most like secretive, wealthy enclave that nobody really knows about. And it's Smoke Tree Ranch. And I was like, oh, wait a minute, I wrote about that. You can go there in my book. And, um, but yeah, Smoke Tree Ranch is this massive property. It's actually like native desert, which is really shocking. It hasn't been developed except for the small portion of it. Walt Disney used to live there. And it was actually founded by Midwesterners, mostly from Michigan, during the Lindbergh kidnapping time. It was all these wealthy people who wanted to make sure that their kids would be safe when they were on vacation. So that's the property is very secluded and always has been. And it's really rarefied. And the thing I love about it is when people think of Palm Springs, they think of caftans and Aperol spritzes by the pool and Frank Sinatra and mid-century modern architecture. But a part of Palm Springs that I love to explore and that's very present in the part of Palm Springs where we live is more like old Palm Springs with the Spanish colonial architecture and places like Smoke Tree. And I just love the nostalgia of Palm Springs past.
Uh, Christina Clancy, our guest today, her book is The Snowbirds. Great to have her with us. And you can join in if you have a question or comment or maybe an experience to share about your own relationship and how you've survived together as a partnership. Number to call 800-642-1234, or you can email us. The email address talk@wpr.org. That's talk@wpr.org. Love to hear from you. Another character that I really found interesting was Cassie.
Oh,
Uh, Talk about her and how you created her life philosophy. I think Clara Neipert, our producer for today, really liked her as well.
oh, she's fun. She's really young, and she's a shaman. But as Kim notices, she looks like she could work at Lululemon, so she doesn't she defies everyone's expectations. She's very beautiful and engaging, and I loved writing her character because a lot of times when as a Midwesterner myself going to Palm Springs, there's a lot of things about Palm Springs that are different than what we experience in the Midwest. And first of all, we started going to sound baths, I'm starting to see sound baths in Madison, but in the desert, it's a really big deal. And there's a lot of alternative spirituality. And I wanted to introduce that in a respectful way, because when you meet people who are very spiritual in ways that might be different than we are, they're so sincere about it. And so I actually met a shaman and became friends with her, and she helped me research the role of Cassie. And I thought it was really, Kim and Grant are having problems, and so they needed an intermediary. And you could have a therapist, you could have a priest, you could have a rabbi, you could have somebody else who you would expect, but to have a shaman walk in and talk about Grant being an energy vampire, it just was pretty fun to write about.
So describe people. Some people are saying, "Well, what was that again? Sound baths?"
Sound baths are where you lie down and, a bath sounds relaxing, right?
Hmm.
Like you think, oh, it's going to be so mellow. I'm just going to lie down and I'm lying down. But you lie down and they have these bowls that they run a mallet over the rims of the mallet of the bowls. And it's so loud that it feels literally kind of like a sound blade that runs through you. And the whole goal is to like jiggle your cells, as you're listening. And we went to this place. I also wrote about it in the book. And if listeners Google it, it's called the Integratron. And it's out near Joshua Tree. It's this structure that's dome-like, and it was built actually with the help of Howard Hughes. He helped get the redwoods from the Pacific Northwest to build this dome. It's acoustically perfect. There are no nails. There's no metal on the inside of it. So it was originally like a spaceship. It was supposed to turn backwards and communicate with the Venusians from Venus. And then the guy who started it died. And so the family has taken it over and now they have sound baths. And it really is a remarkable place to go. If you are planning a trip to Palm Springs, you have to book it months in advance. They sell out. And for 30, 45 minutes, you lie down and they'll play different bowls that are supposed to do different things to your chakras. And it's a pretty phenomenal experience. I definitely recommend it.
And it appears in the book.
Yes. Kim and Grant have a moment in the sound bath.
Dennis in Two Rivers, we'll give you a chance to join in. Dennis, thanks for calling.
Hi, well, I'm calling about something that was brought up before, but as far as sound bath, it would also seem like it would be something that would be like a massage, too, because of the vibrations. But I was calling because of what you were talking about with grudges and people changing, is it seems when somebody has a grudge, whether it's against family members or whatever, they could have a political grudge, but then they just hold on to that and they don't adjust to reality as it changes, whether it's with relationships that are close to them or how people change in society.
Dennis, thanks for calling. Comments, Christina?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that something has to change in order to let go of a grudge. So whether it's having a sound bath, jiggle your cells to change that, or a conversation that you might have with somebody that has to be forced, that can help. So that was what's helpful with the book, is to move the plot along and have the characters face obstacles that force them to change and address each other.
You can join in too. Number to call 800-642-1234 or email to talk@wpr.org. An emailer wonders, how much backstory do you create for your characters, and how much actually gets in the book?
I love that question. When I teach, one of the things I always tell my students is that your first draft you write for yourself, and then the second draft and beyond is for your readers. So sometimes in your first draft, you'll have a lot of backstory that you need so that you can get to know your characters and you can understand them. But then as you revise, you realize your character or your readers don't necessarily need all the backstory. They don't need to know everything, but you can kind of like skim off the top and give them just what they need to keep the story moving. So with this book, I did a lot of pre-writing where I would write backgrounds of the story. There's so much that's not in the book that's in my head, where I just needed to know. And that's also a great thing about having a wonderful editor. She was really helpful, saying, the reader really doesn't need to know this. And, for anyone who's an aspiring writer, like one thing that one of my former professors used to say is trust your reader. And I thought that was such great advice, because readers are smart and you don't necessarily need to be ham-fisted and force everything down. They can deal with nuance, and you don't have to share everything.
Grant, to me, was a character who's very distinct views about the world as a philosophy professor. Was it easy to build, or maybe I should say, how did you build this character?
Well, I wanted Grant to be somebody who was so absorbed in the life of the mind that he kind of can't be in a relationship in a very productive way, because he's so caught up in his thoughts and his ideas that he's just not really in the physical world with his partner. So I needed to get Grant, like hiking was a great way to get Grant out of his head and into the wild. It's kind of like teaching a baby to swim by throwing him into a pool, you know? So, yeah, he can be really frustrating. But I really like Grant. I know that,
Yeah.
everyone has their flaws.
Well, I have to say I liked him better than I liked Kim.
Oh, that's interesting. Kim, I wanted to make kind of a character who was really normal. I wanted her to
Yeah.
not have too many quirks. I wanted her to be somebody that almost anyone could read. Like she's kind of like a vessel where I wanted people to be able to relate to most of the way she would see the world.
You have a PhD in creative writing from UW Milwaukee, and you taught at English at Beloit College. How did I imagine those experiences helped you craft Grant's character and the world of academia in which he lives?
Right. And I was actually worried people would think it's Beloit College that I'm writing about. And at first it kind of was. Just like with characters, you base a character sometimes off like a sketch of somebody that you know, but then they start taking on their own shape. But I think from Grant's perspective, when I was working at Beloit College, they were dealing with a lot of budget issues. And I just started being fascinated with the idea of like, what if this place closed? And it made me so sad to think of just the wonderful students and all the energy that faculty put into teaching them. And I, um, I, I feel like that carries over into the book. And I wanted Grant, he's grieving the fact that
Yeah.
he's lost the college he worked at actually did close. And so he's kind of petulant and hard to deal with, but at the same time, he's a sad person. He's lost part of his identity is being a teacher. So I feel like Kim she's tolerant of that, but and she's sympathetic, but at the same time, she also just kind of needs him to be there with her.
Yeah, yeah. Well, as when I was reading it, at first I thought, oh, he's probably Beloit College because I knew you taught there. But then I thought, no, the place sounds more, the community sounds more like Ripon College.
Oh yeah, it could be anywhere. I imagined it in central Wisconsin. And I'm pretty proud of the name I came up with for it. I don't know if you remember College of the Mounds.
Yeah.
I laughed
How
to
did you come
myself
up
when
with that?
I don't know, but it just came up and I just started laughing and I was like, "Oh, that is a good name for a college."
Well, I thought, well, the community itself reminded me more of like Ripon College, and then I thought Northland too, and so then I just realized, well, there's probably little bits of a lot of places.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think that, I think also in shoulder season, not to keep bringing up shoulder season, but that's also about small towns. And I love the town of East Troy, Wisconsin, and I wanted to kind of redeem life in small towns. It's so meaningful there. And I think there's this tension, not just between Madison and Palm Springs, but Kim and Grant have always had a tension in their relationship between living in Madison or moving to the small town where Grant teaches. And Kim's quick to disparage it, but Grant loves it. And Kim just needs to learn to find to love what he loves.
And they do a lot of work on themselves
Mhm.
during the course of the story. I think. How do you see them, or how do we see them? The reader sees them evolve as individuals.
Well, I think the work they do on themselves is kind of coaxed out of them by the people that they meet who test their boundaries and make them see life a little differently. They have them explore, for Kim, she wants to have fun. So she meets this wonderful couple, Thomas and Raul, who live in the quirky condo complex, and they get her to go to their morning workout classes. And in Palm Springs, I go to a morning workout class in Ruth Hardy Park, and people wear tutus and outfits, and it's just like Richard Simmons, and they play disco music, and you like do Hakuna Matata at the sun staring at the mountains, and it's just like something you wouldn't necessarily see. This like open expression of joy, and the beauty of being outdoors in Palm Springs in February. So I think the weather too helps Kim, become more loose and relaxed because she likes being in the warmth. And then the Grant also, Kim starts seeing that Grant is actually really great with people, and she appreciates his openness to meeting new people, and how he kind of takes on Gene, the older man, and he takes him to like the air show or the air museum, and he takes him grocery shopping, and she starts seeing that Grant's a good guy.
Yeah.
He does good things. So I think that's part of how they change, is by leaning into the community that they've found.
Yeah, and it was that was a fun part of it for me. And I was thinking about how does a person's personality change when you go? I mean, let's say you've got this home, and in this case, for them, it was Madison.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're in Palm Springs where you don't really know anybody, but you make friends. But does it cause a person's personality to change as they move in that kind of a way, do you think?
Well, I think so, based on the time we spend in Palm Springs. But I think what I'm most moved by and struck by profoundly is, the word snowbird is really laden, right?
Yeah.
There's a line in the book where Kim and Grant arrive and they overhear someone say, "Oh God, the snowbirds are here." Now there's going to be a line for prescriptions at the Walgreens, but the people that are snowbirds are really, really close. If you go to the same condo complex every year after year, and you aren't working and you have time for each other and you have time for friends, you can develop some of the most intense, meaningful relationships of your life with the other people who are around you. And with the first year we were snowbirds, the Canadians couldn't come because it was COVID. And everyone in our condo complex missed the Canadians so much. And then the next year, while I was working on the book, the Canadians were back and they were so happy to be back. And I was struck by how profoundly impacted their lives were by each other. They're there for, when you get older, things happen. Your own health might suffer, your partner's health might suffer, your friends might need help, their kids might have issues, and they are part of all of it. And so even though they're temporary residents, they might feel more rooted and at home in the place where they snowbird than they do even where they live, because where you live, you get busy and you get into your routines.
As you were talking, I was thinking about even in short-term situations, this can happen. Now, I've had season football tickets for the Badgers for years and years and years. I sit in the same two chairs. I've got whoever I bring along with me, usually my daughter. And I see the people behind me and the people right in front of me and the people on either side of me, and it's just, and they're friends, even though I never see them, and it would be hard to give up the tickets for the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really fascinating. Sharon and De Pere, you have something for us. Hi.
Hey, Larry. I'm a librarian, so I love when you talk to authors. And I'm looking forward to reading this book, newly came out. I'm actually on my way to work, so I got to see if we have it. And I'm curious who some of the authors' favorite contemporary authors she likes to read are.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I love that question. It's so funny. Sometimes, even though I read all the time, when people ask me for favorite authors, it's like when someone says, "Tell me a joke." And you're like, I've been reading so much lately. I just read Colored Television by Danza Sana. Is that she's married to Percival Everett, who wrote James. I thought that was a wonderful story. I read Martyr, which I really loved. I thought that was terrific. I love the writer. She's a Canadian writer named Miriam Teves, and Daniel Golden at Boswell Books put her book, All My Puny Sorrows, in my hand when I walked through the store into the store one day. And he said, "Just don't even read about this. Just read it. Trust me." Which is like the great thing about knowing librarians and booksellers, right? Like they know you and what you'll like. And All My Puny Sorrows is one of my favorite books. And I love Miriam Teves. You spell it Toews is her name. My friend Sarah Sliger has a wonderful book that just came out called Vantage Point. Linda Cohen Loigman is a friend of mine. She wrote a book called The Love Elixir of Augusta Stern that I really enjoy. My friend Maggie Ginsberg has a book called Still True that came out, and everyone who I talked to who's read that book, including myself, just goes crazy for it. It's with the University of Wisconsin Press. So those are some that just sprung into my mind, and as soon as we hang up, I know I'm going to wish I'd mentioned other ones.
Sharon, thank you so much for calling. Appreciate your call. I want to go back to one thing we haven't covered really, which kind of plays a big role in the book, is hiking. And Grant goes on a hike near Palm Springs and gets lost, but he becomes it's one thing that really grabs his attention and something that he really gets into when they get to Palm Springs.
Yeah, well, I am an avid hiker. And I would go out during COVID and I'd hike for miles and miles. And all of a sudden I'd look around and realized I hadn't seen anyone in an hour or two. And I'd wonder, am I a stupid tourist out here? Am I risking my life and I don't even realize it? And so I started learning about, I would Google missing hiker Palm Springs. And I became kind of obsessed with all those stories. And I think our culture has kind of a collective fascination with lost hiker stories too. They just are so interesting to think that somebody could go on a hike and maybe never, ever be found again. That's the last you ever see or hear from them. And the idea of getting lost, I think, is also really fascinating. And then when we bought our condo, I met these friends, Gord and Roger, and they had gone for a hike, I think in 2018. And only Gord came back. And Roger was in his 70s. He was missing for 3 days. And everyone assumed that he was not alive. And when they were telling me the story about it, they found him, thank goodness, just in the nick of time. But I was really interested, not so much in what happened to Roger when he was hiking, but in what it must have been like for his wife, Sheila, and for Gord to come back from that hike and wait for updates from the rescue people. And I always wonder that when I hear about anyone going missing. And so I was able to chat with them a lot about it and hear about how our condo complex came together to unite around Roger's search. And I find it really life affirming to know that when someone is missing on a hike, that such a massive effort is undertaken. It's expensive. It's resource intensive. They need a lot of technology. People risk their lives to try to find someone who's missing. And I think that's one of the best, most human things in the world, is to care about someone when they're gone and to help a total stranger find their way home.
Oh. Christina Clancy, our guest. Her novel is The Snowbirds. I'm Larry Mealer for WPR News. Talking today with Christina Clancy. She is the author of the novel The Snowbirds, and having a great time talking with her about the book. Questions, comments, experience, I hope you'll join in. The number's 800-642-1234, or you can email us to talk@wpr.org. That hiking part of it really got to me. I've hiked. I like to hike. And I have not hiked in California, but I have hiked in Arizona, the Saguaro National Park near Tucson. And boy, it gets drummed into your head. Do not go off the paths, and all of the care that you should be taking. Once, just for fun, I walked off a path. But I kept a saguaro, a particular one, right next to the path when I walked off, and I turned around and I took about 50 steps off, and I turned around, and if I hadn't known that saguaro, I could not see the path. I mean, it's so easy to get screwed up.
Yeah, it's easy. And also when you're hiking, especially in Palm Springs, I was actually just doing an event yesterday in La Jolla. And one of the people at the event said she'd gone hiking, a 2-mile hike in Palm Springs. And she said there were 2 paths that diverged, and she didn't even go off the path. She just took a different one, and she got turned around. And there's this moment when you realize you're really and truly lost. And it's a physiological phenomenon. Like your whole body changes with that kind of fear. And I think we don't think enough about orientation, and how important that is in our brains. It's just reading that taxi drivers and ambulance drivers have the lowest incidence of Alzheimer's. And they think that's because they're finding their way around. But because of GPS, we're used to knowing where we are because of that blue dot on our phone. But it's really helpful. And also a lot of the research I did said children should learn how to get lost. That it's a skill that they don't learn because we're always so careful with kids.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've read some research. I think there was some research done on London cab drivers who the part of their brain was much larger than normal because they had learned. I mean, that part of the brain that would tell you the streets and how to get from here to there was much enlarged.
Yeah, I try not to use GPS as much now. I still do sometimes, but I try not to rely on it as much as I would. I really try to think, well, where was I? What were my visual landmarks?
Yeah. These settings, Madison and Palm Springs, they're such an important part of the novel. And a place can mean so many different things to different people. How do you did such a nice job of capturing the layers of Madison, for example, which I have spent many a year in. How do you capture the layers of a city in your writing?
That's so interesting. I'm definitely a writer of place. Until I know where my book is set, I can't start writing because place becomes like another character. And it was fun writing Palm Springs because I wasn't an expert on Palm Springs the way people who have been there their whole lives and have family and for generations in Palm Springs, but I could write about what it's like to go there as a snowbird. And I think for myself, I could capture Madison because I had spent time away from Madison, and being gone made me appreciate it. And it made me see it from a different vantage than I was used to. So I think the culture of Madison, it's funny. I worry people are going to think I'm stereotyping the characters because they have like all the bumper stickers you would expect Madisonians to have on their car, and they're pretty liberal, and they have like different opinions about like liberal arts colleges versus UW, and but that's just very much what I experience when I'm there. And one thing that I thought earlier about having characters from a more conservative place and have them be more uptight so that going to Palm Springs would be more jarring for them. But what was great about writing about people from Madison is that it would still be different culturally and socially, but they'd be very open to a place like Palm Springs. So it helped usher in the changes that I wanted the characters to undergo a little faster.
Where did you do most of your writing for the book? Was it in Wisconsin or California?
We have a little cottage on Lake Beulah in East Troy, and we have a sun porch, and almost all my books, I'd say 80% of all my books are written in that room. I don't know what it is about the light and the peace and calm that I feel. And I did do some writing in Palm Springs also, especially for this book. But this is the first book I've spent a lot of time writing in Palm Springs. But I'd go on an adventure, I'd learn something, and then I just open up my laptop and start writing. It just kind of fed the story.
I loved the little asides about the people, the real people who had lived there and so forth. That was really a fun part of the book for a little aside, but a fun part of the book for me, sure.
It was fun for me to write.
And I know your other book, The Second Home, is going to become a TV series?
Well, I mean, who knows? Somebody said, they say in Hollywood, they overpromise and underdeliver, and in publishing, they underpromise and overdeliver. So I don't know if that's true. But yeah, it was originally optioned by Nikolai Coster-Waldau, who played Jaime Lannister in Game of Thrones. Yeah. And he's quite a hunk. And he wanted to play the character Anthony. And then during the writer's strike, all the people at Sony TriStar who they would normally work on the option with had left. And so right now there's a screenwriting team in Los Angeles who have optioned it, and they want to turn it into a feature film instead of a TV series. So that's in the works. And who knows?
Yeah, and maybe the Snowbirds will eventually turn into a movie. Who knows?
Yeah, or a series. Maybe every season they'll be in a different place.
Christina Clancy, thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate your time and really enjoyed the book. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, you're a pro. Thank you so much, Larry. I'm just so honored to be on your show.
Christina Clancy's book, The Snowbirds. Thank you for listening. I'm Larry Mealer. Great to have you with us on the show today. We're talking turning our attention to Wisconsin's dairy industry and the impact it has on the state's economy. There's been quite a bit of research on this. There's been a report that has looked at its impact, and we'll talk with a couple of guests for you today. One of them, Mark Crave. Mark is one of the founders of Crave Brothers Farmstead Cheese in Waterloo. And Mark, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks, Larry. Glad to be here.
With us as well, Ben Miller, an old friend of mine. We go back a long ways. We worked together in the same department many a year back, but now he has moved on and up, and he's vice president of industry relations for dairy farmers of Wisconsin. Ben, good to see you.
Larry, it's great to see you, and thanks for having us today.
Well, as we talk with Ben and Mark, I hope you'll join in. What do you want to know how milk or cheese gets from the cow to your fridge, perhaps? Wondering how farmers navigate changing milk prices. Give us your questions about the dairy industry. The number to call, 800-642-1234. It's 1-800-642-1234. Or you could email us to talk@wpr.org. Mark, let's start with you. We're talking about the industry. I want to hear what dairy farms are like today, and I'm sure a lot of people are as well interested in that on the ground. So give us a little tour of your family farm.
Sure. Well, like every thing in modern society, dairy farms have changed right along with the rest of society. And so today's farm, some of it is the same. We still milk cows every day. We still feed the cows, milk the cows, have baby calves being born, and whether it's 80 degrees or below zero like it was this morning. So we still have those jobs to perform, but really it's how we do it that's changed. And, over the time as we've grown farms in size, of course, that's well documented and among people's conversation. And part of the reason those farms have grown in size is economies of scale. And also in my case, we have, I'm one of 6 current family members. I have 3 older brothers that are in different phases of retirement, and I have 5 next generation, so nieces and nephews who work with us. And so we all specialize within that. So one of the opportunities that we have is to try to get better at what we do within our roles on the farm today. We have herds people, we have calf feeders, we have people that grow the crops, maintenance. We just and then everybody shows up every day and just gets that work done.
Yeah, it's a fascinating. What's the key to success for you guys? I mean, we're talking about a big family, a lot of people needing to earn an income and live and do something they love to do.
Well, certainly, and I mentioned my family, but we also have a sizable staff, people that choose to drive down our country road every day and make a career on our farm and our cheese factory, and that's one of the things that we're proud of over time. It wasn't so much when I first started farming. I just wanted to be a farmer. I liked the work and I wanted to have a career in it. But really, I've taken pride over the years of being able to be support our community in the form of jobs and economic impact, which we'll talk about. And so I think one of the main keys with any group of people is communication.
Yeah.
Talking about the right things at the right time. Not confusing a family discussion with a staff discussion. And, you learn over time techniques with that. As I said, I have 3 older brothers. I'm the youngest of 7 children. There was 4 of us that farmed together. And one of the reasons people say, well, how did 4 brothers get along? And one of the things I'll share is it's because we wanted to. It was a goal. Just like if you have a goal of losing 20 pounds, or in our case of growing 200 bushels of corn per acre on your farm, you go about a plan. You do the research, you look into it, and you implement best practices. And my family and I have tried to do that too. Try to implement best practices around how we're gonna going to manage a family business.
Yeah. Bill, let's turn to you. How much impact does the dairy industry have on our state's economy?
It's a big deal here in Wisconsin, as you know. We just did a report with UW-Madison, the Ag Economic Department, and we discovered that over the last 5 years, the economic impact went up by 16%, or over $52.8 billion in terms of the direct and indirect impact on the state's economy. And to put that into some perspective, the entire state budget is about $50 billion or so. Yeah. So this is larger than our entire Wisconsin state budget. It's a really big deal. And another important point, the economic impact went up during the years of COVID. And the country and the world in many ways was shutting down during that time. And this report confirms what we have already known as Wisconsinites, that we are the dairy state, that our hardworking dairy farm families like Mark weren't shutting down. They were working and milking cows 365, and the benefits have paid off here in terms of the growth in the economic impact.
And as I compare, the dairy industry isn't the only ag industry in the state, but it's the biggest one.
Yeah,
Ben, is it not?
Yeah. So the entire ag industry, the report uncovered about $116 billion economic impact, and dairy is half of that. It's a really big deal, and continues to be a big deal, a big share of our rural economy.
Jonah in Green Bay has a question for you. Let's go there. Hi, Jonah.
Hi there, Larry. Nice to speak with you.
Well, thanks for calling. What's on your mind?
So I think it was in 2023, maybe 2022, that Tammy Baldwin had this initiative where she was pushing back against almond milk and cashew milk, or not necessarily pushing back against it, like not recommending to drink it, just trying to keep that kind of milk and cow's milk separate to the benefit of dairy farmers. And I'm wondering if those efforts in 2023, any of the bills or initiatives she worked on, if those have had an impact in the past year and a half.
Yeah, it was the term milk, I think, that really came into play here, Ben.
Yeah, well, I can't directly attribute what's happening in the industry to the legislation that the caller is referring to, but I can say dairy is hitting its mark. Cheese demand is through the roof. Butter, yogurt, cottage cheese, all of the dairy products are really back in style, so to speak. We've known the benefits, the nutritional benefits forever, and we're so excited to see that dairy's having this return, this renaissance moment, so to speak. And I think there are many reasons for that. But Mark, what do you think?
I totally agree, and nothing really came of her proposal, even though she has been a great advocate for Wisconsin dairy and for dairy in general, because it was basically caught up in regulation and government red tape. And so, as farmers, we can't spend much time in red tape, and so we just keep making good products. And to Ben's point is, people are finding what they're looking for. I think a lot of those artificial products were trendy. It was a trend. Mm-hmm. And, people are also looking for, alongside that, clean label. Well, dairy has clean label, right? Mm-hmm. Very few ingredients. And I would go as to say, in my household, we're not even allowed to call that milk. Went to a coffee shop one day, and the barista asked what kind of milk I wanted in my coffee, and my wife was standing next to me, and she looked up at me with wide eyes and says, "Oh, where's this going?" So I had to educate the young man that two of the three options weren't really milk.
Oh my gosh. Ben Miller from Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin. He's Vice President of Industry Relations. Mark Crave is one of the founders of Crave Brothers Farmstead Cheese in Waterloo. It's great to have both of them with us. And again, you can join in with your questions about the dairy industry at 800-642-1234, or you could email us to talk@wpr.org. Many people probably think of dairy farming as something that strictly kind of affects the maybe the rural economy, Ben, but what impact does it have on urban economies?
Yeah, I mean, as part of this report, we were able to identify the cluster effect of dairy. It's truly an integrated supply chain. It's not just the hard work that's happening on the farm, but all of the services and the equipment and the other businesses that are connected to that farm that trickle throughout the entire state. So it really is one of these rare industries in Wisconsin and in the country where you have that cluster that benefits span rural and urban economies. And we expect that to continue moving forward.
And so you've got the farm, the sort of the farm economy part of it, but then there's the industrial, if you will, industrial side of things.
Yeah, I mean, all of the equipment Mark can speak to this, the supplies that go in the plant, right, that get used on the farm, the steel, the specialized equipment where that's getting produced and processed is coming from all parts of the state and the country. So, Mark, you can probably talk more about how that is an integrated system.
Well, sure. There's that, and there's on the farm side we even have. Talk about the feed. The largest input in any livestock industry is feed, and one of the things that we're conscious of, Larry, is we did just quick napkin math one day, and we figured about 90% of our expenses on our dairy farm are spent within a 50-mile radius of the farm. So it's very local. It when we say it benefits the local economy, that's the truth. And then, of course, there's jobs. And when the milk goes down the road to a processing plant, of course, those there again are more jobs, and their expense, their checks go back to the farm. And so it really is an integrated system. And then eventually that cheese, butter, milk does get to a consumer who pays their hard-earned money for it, and then eventually that works its way back to the farm. So we need all aspects of it for us to stay on the land, to stay on the farm, and support our local economies.
Actually, John had emailed from wondering about the supply chain from the time the cow is milked to the time it reaches the grocery store as milk or cheese.
Yeah, I can't speak to every thing, but I would say a lot of it certainly is less than a week. No milk stays on the farm for more than 2 days. Specifically to our own farmstead cheese, we milk the cows. The cows that are getting milked right now, as we speak, that milk will be piped over to our cheese factory tomorrow or tonight overnight around midnight, and by tomorrow morning that will be going into the vats to make cheese. So we make all fresh cheeses, so it's very fresh, and of course it's refrigerated, it's perishable, just like the milk jug you put in your refrigerator at home. Time is of the essence, and so we have a great infrastructure built here. And oftentimes the unsung hero in this, too, is our milk haulers. Our milk haulers that also work 7 days a week collecting the milk and getting it to the processing plant.
Don in Bayfield has a question. Let's go there. Hi, Don.
Hello, Don here. Say, I'm kind of wondering about all the farm workers who are immigrants. How is that going to affect their lives, their society, when the chosen one kicks them all out of the country?
Well,
let me start.
Go ahead and start, Ben.
And I want to be clear. We as dairy farmers of Wisconsin, we're explicitly prohibited from lobbying, and we're primarily the promotion arm for Wisconsin's dairy industry. But we know that this topic is one that's important, not just to dairy, but to all of agriculture and other parts of our economy as well. We know that our farmers and dairy processors are facing challenges in filling shifts and jobs, and I'm sure Mark can speak to that. We're monitoring it closely because it does have such a large impact on our dairy farms here in Wisconsin. And like I said, many organizations here in the state are working to modify the system, perhaps make it more reflective of what's happening, and what the needs are in the industry. But like I said, we aren't allowed to weigh in on that. But I don't know, Mark, if there's anything else you want to say about it.
Not much. It's certainly, we're aware of it, as you stated, and as farmers, we deal with a lot of uncontrollables. First and foremost, the weather. Then we're dealing with livestock and also people. And so there's a lot of unpredictability and all that. And so we know that when we get up in the morning and we just make the decisions every day that we need to do to get our work done.
Ben Miller and Mark Crave, our guest today. Ben is with the Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin. He's Vice President of Industry Relations. Mark Crave, one of the founders of Crave Brothers Farmstead Cheese in Waterloo. I'm Larry Mealer. Questions for our two guys about the dairy industry. I hope you'll join in. Number to call, 800-642-1234, or email to talk@wpr.org. I'm Larry Mealer for WPR News. Great to have you along today on WPR News as we take a look at the dairy industry today with our guest Ben Miller from Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin and Mark Crave, who is one of the founders of Crave Brothers Farmstead Cheese in Waterloo. Lots of callers coming online. The number to call for you is 800-642-1234, or, of course, you could email us to talk@wpr.org. Tell us a little about the current dairy consumption trends, Ben.
Yeah, I mean, we're like I was saying earlier in the show, we're having our moment here, and consumer demand is really through the roof. Some of our processors are struggling, to meet that demand, specifically in such areas like cottage cheese and yogurt. Really explosion of growth. Wisconsin, not many folks know this, but, we're the number one specialty cheese producer in the country. And there continues to be an outstanding demand for those high-quality, award-winning cheeses.
Yeah.
Wisconsin is annually awarded more than any other state or country. And we know that dairy provides just a powerful pack of nutrients, all of the products, and it is exciting to see our consumers going back to the store for those types of products that will meet their dietary needs.
Gene in Lafarge has something for us. Let's go there. Hi, Gene.
Hey, Larry. I'm a large old veterinarian out of Lafarge, so I work with a lot of dairies. And I work also out west in California and then with nomadic pastoralists in East Africa. And as I'm traveling, I go to these, I pick up my gas and I go in for something quick to drink, and I'm always looking for milk. And there's just so many things to buy that aren't milk. There's like, all these energy drinks and soda pop, and sometimes it's hard just to find regular milk. I am starting to see like milk, like protein drinks, and so I wondered, is there something we can do to promote that more in these little gas stations, even in Wisconsin, but across the state, to promote milk drinks? That's my first question.
Yeah. Gene, thanks. Ben?
I'll go first. Gene, thanks for the call. I want to give a shout out to our friends at the Center for Dairy Research here at UW-Madison. They are partners of ours. The Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin have invested and, in fact, helped create the Center for Dairy Research here, which is a world-class facility. We just had our board meeting over there a couple of weeks ago and learned about some of the new products that the experts are working on: extended shelf life, snacks, grab and grow, that will be sort of meeting the consumer demand for protein primarily, but also moving a lot of product for us. So, Mark, you were there, so maybe you want to say a few.
Well, I was, and to Gene's point, fluid milk consumption has dropped throughout the United States over the last 20, 25 years. People's eating habits change. The old traditional gallon jug in the middle of the dinner table at night isn't as common as it was around the table on the table I grew up around. And but as we also say in Wisconsin, we don't necessarily drink our milk, we eat it. So while we've seen fluid milk consumption go down, we've seen dairy consumption per capita go up in the form of cheese, yogurt, cottage cheese, so many butter has had a resurgence. And so while it can be frustrating to find that fluid milk, that's going to change too, because number one, we've already seen just last year was the first year in like 20 some years that we actually saw fluid milk consumption increase from the previous year. So hopefully we've hit bottom and we're on our way back up. Secondly, as Ben mentioned, the Center for Dairy Research right here on the UW campus just went through over a $70 million renovation in Babcock Hall. And the whole third floor of that facility is geared towards soft products and beverages. And so just watch. Within the next few years, we're going to see some fantastic new products come out of that facility that companies will be working in conjunction with the Center for Dairy Research and the Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin to develop new beverages.
Yeah. Excellent. Gene, I think you had another question as well.
Yeah, I was curious. So we're talking a lot about cattle, and what about I work with a couple of producers with both dairy goats and dairy sheep. I think we're number one as far as goats are in the U.S. I wonder if you can share a little bit about sheep and goat dairy as well.
Yeah, I can't share much. Obviously, on my dairy farm, we milk Holstein cows, and the dairy farmers of Wisconsin are funded by people that milk cows by our and so the sheep and the goats, while they certainly play a part in the dairy industry, the organization that Ben works for and that I'm on the board for don't represent that.
Another email: how are milk prices determined? That's a big story.
There might be some courses here you want to get in on.
Yeah. The prices are a complicated formula that flows through the USDA, and it is market data based on supply and demand and what consumers are paying and what processors are paying, and it goes through a convoluted scheme of numbers, and in the end they come up with a price, and then there's premiums put on from each individual farm. So milk is milk. When you buy a 2% jug in the store, it's 2% milk fat. Of course, cows produce a lot more milk fat than that. And so every farm has different levels, different quality levels of butter fat, protein, other solids. And so then it's adjusted for that. So it's a complicated formula. But the one interesting thing that most callers, I think it would be interesting and is novel, that the milk, so today we're in late February. Our milk price for the milk we're producing today, we won't find out until mid-March. So we go to work every day, 7 days a week, milking cows, morning, noon, and night. And we don't know what that product is going to be worth for as long as 45 days. And so that shows you the complexity to it. And that's as far as I can get into it without a PhD thesis on it.
It is quite a complicated story for sure.
Absolutely.
I can remember some of my school days back, even back when I was a student. The system described to me at the time, I thought, of how milk prices are determined was...
Well, to show you the complexity of it, they just, they're called the federal milk marketing orders, so there's different orders around the country. They just revamped those after a qualifying time period, had hearings for 49 days. They took testimony for 49 days on changing the federal milk marketing orders, and I attended 0 of them.
Mark in Wisconsin Rapids has something for us. Let's go there. Hi, Mark.
Hi, just came back from visiting my son in Fort Collins, Colorado, and had an opportunity to go through a local dairy there. I think it was Miller Dairy. I'm not sure, but one of the things I thought was really interesting was they're allied with a company called Noosa, which makes yogurt. It's an Australian yogurt. Probably the best yogurt I've ever had. It's a thicker yogurt, and it typically has fruit mixed. But one of the things I really enjoyed about the dairy is after the tour through the dairy, and they have a circular parlor, is the flavored milks that they had. And I've tasted some flavored milk at the Wisconsin State Fair, but I don't see anything regularly on the shelf. But they had lemon milk and strawberry milk and chocolate milk and just a whole host of different flavors. And I thought, wow, this is great. I mean, you want a protein source that kids might really enjoy, is more flavored milk on the shelves in Wisconsin. So that's just my comment, and encourage Wisconsin's dairy industry to do a whole lot more than what they are to encourage people to drink milk, which is a great source of protein and calcium. I'm a milk drinker my whole life. I'm 78 years old, so
well,
keep going.
Mark, I thank you very much for calling. So let's turn to another Mark Crave here for a comment.
Sure. Well, thanks for being such a dedicated milk drinker. And what we're trying to do at Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin is build that habit like you have, Mark, from an early onset. So it's very fitting that March Madness is coming up, and the Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin are one of the major contributors to broadcasting the WIAA boys and girls basketball, wrestling, I think even football. So throughout the school year, and along with that, we're promoting flavored milk, chocolate milk, as a sports recovery drink. And so we're making a lot of headway with research that's been done that farmers have funded, and also getting that milk in front of those student athletes. And as you can imagine, after a sporting event, they just devour it. That milk disappears in one flick of the wrist.
Mark, we need to get you on staff at Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin. You're a great ambassador for dairy.
Well, here's another Mark. This one from Appleton. Hi, Mark.
Hi there. I was wondering, out of all the milk that's produced in Wisconsin, how much of it stays here? Are we exporting any, and are we importing any, and how far away do we import if we are?
Great.
Ben.
Yeah, great question. Very few folks know this, but 90% of the milk produced here in the state gets turned into cheese. So as Mark Crave here mentioned, we like to eat our milk here. And 90% of the cheese is exported beyond the boundaries of Wisconsin. And so you can see why we spend a lot of our effort and time on promotion of cheese. You can find Wisconsin cheese in 99% of the grocery stores in America. That's how much cheese gets exported out of the state. And I think it's a testament to Mark and his fellow dairy farmers from across the state to get that product out.
Mark, thank you very much for calling. Appreciate your call. And you can join in too. Number's 800-642-1234 or email to talk@wpr.org. Here's an interesting question. An email from Cassandra. Can a bovine grow to over 1,000 pounds from consuming only grass, water, and salt blocks?
Yes, they can. I don't know what makes 1,000 pounds the magic number. Typically, a modern Holstein cow will weigh anywhere from around 1,400 pounds when she has her first calf, and we have cows that will get up over a ton. They'll be over 2,000 pounds. A mature cow that's grown and developed, and but we feed them a lot more than just water, grass, and salt. We certainly, we all have nutritional needs, including those of us, listening today, that require more mineral balance and a balanced ration. And so while grass is a great feed stuff for a cow, there's other nutrients that we bring in and other feeds on our farm to meet that cow's entire nutrient profile needs.
Yeah, that makes good sense. Another question about how do milk prices affect an individual dairy farmer?
Well, they have huge effect. The milk is a commodity, just like corn, soybeans, crude oil. It's a commodity, and so it really reacts to the supply and demand equation, Econ 101, and that certainly comes right back to our farm. And so one of the things that farmers are adept to, as I mentioned earlier, we always don't know the price ahead of time. We plan, we manage our farms because we know low prices will be will eventually go up and high prices will eventually come down. And so it does take a lot of financial management. I guess the greater question is, just we have a lot more complexity around managing the finances on a farm. Of course, those barns are expensive. Machinery is expensive. Land always goes up in value. And so we have a huge amount of investment on our farm before we ever milk a cow. And so, the model of the 1950s where the farmer would have one checkbook in the, on the top of the refrigerator in the farmhouse, and the milk check would go in there, and they'd write the expenses out of it right along with new shoes and dental bills for the kids. Those days are long gone.
Yeah, and the industry prices they fluctuate a lot, and if they're up one year, they're down the next, and back and forth. Sometimes though, if you get an extended low point, that is where I think it gets difficult for a lot of farmers.
Yeah, one good thing I'll chime in a little bit is the recent investments that are happening across the country in processing capability. So we're aware of maybe $8 billion in planned investment in new processing plants across the country. That's a good sign that the market will remain strong for dairy for years to come. And that's not to say that there will be fluctuations and good months and tough months, but the long-term trajectory looks really strong.
Well, and here in Wisconsin, that's one of the reasons for the emphasis behind our specialty cheese movement, is those typically tend to be higher value cheeses. They sell for a higher retail price in the store, and with all things being right, we can hopefully get some of those dollars back to the farm gate. And of course, there's a lot of people in between, but that's the whole thing. And as Ben said earlier, that 90-90, where 90% of our cheese leaves the state, and hopefully over time. But there will be days that the milk price is below our cost of production. One of the bigger challenges over time, I've been doing this since 1988 when I graduated from the UW here, and one of the bigger challenges I've found over that time period is keeping up with inflation. It's not so much that prices go up and down, but over time, are we keeping up because our expenses go up just like everybody else, and we need to be able to keep up with inflation. So if we see more, there's a lot of news around what products cost in the store, and I would argue that they probably haven't even been, while they are more, and I understand that, and I can sympathize with people. We all have to meet a budget, but those prices today are still very reasonable, and the American consumer enjoys the lowest cost of food as part of their expendable income as anywhere in the world.
Tom in Baraboo has a question for you. Let's go there. Hi, Tom.
Hey, years ago, I don't know if it's still going like this, that Florida had a big milk producing in California and Wisconsin, of course. If they used to be paid in different, their price of milk gauges were different. Like Wisconsin got paid a different price than Florida, and California got different paid. And if that's still going, I mean, I'll give them that they got the best oranges, but not the best milk.
we love their oranges. So in many ways, I'm far from an expert, but in a previous life, I worked in Washington D.C. and worked on a farm bill or a couple of farm bills where there were discussions about reforms to the pricing system, and the order system that Mark just referenced is in some ways still based on this cost of production model, where originally it was identified as Eau Claire, Wisconsin was sort of the epicenter, right? That was the best place or the most efficient, for a variety of reasons. It's not quite clear to me, but all milk prices were based on how far you were from Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Is this right, Larry? You know about this.
Yeah.
They threw a dart at a map and it hit Eau Claire.
It could be. But in so many ways, over the years, the order system has sort of just amended that. It hasn't really destroyed it entirely. And so this complicated structure that we have in place right now, as Mark mentioned, is really hard for folks to figure out. But from a farmer perspective, Mark, what do you...
Well, and Ben, the real difference really is what the milk is used for. So in Florida, for example, just about all that milk would be used for fluid milk. Of course, there's a lot of people that live in the southeast United States. There's not nearly as many cows. There's cows there, but not nearly as many here. And so they're often at a deficit of milk. So they use the fluid there. Of course, it's close, it's fresh. Compared to Wisconsin, we make cheese, so we can ship that around the country and around the world. So that's really what drives the differences in prices, is what product does that milk end up being used in?
Yeah, makes sense. Dot in Manitowoc has a different question. Hi, Dot.
Good afternoon. And I am curious, when the farmer puts the seed into the pasture for the cows to graze, what type of seed do they put into the ground?
Well, that's the type of seed depends on what crop we're growing, right? So there's, in the case of a pasture, for seeding a pasture, we're probably putting a mix in. So we don't want to, because different species of plants have different water needs, different heat tolerances. Some will do better on different types of soil. So oftentimes that seed would be a mix of 4 or 5 or 6 different species. And then also, in addition to that, we grow alfalfa. So we'll plant about a third of our acres on my farm are seeded to alfalfa. And of course, that's a 3-year seeding. So every year we're doing about 1/3 of those acres. We're putting in new seeding, and the other third will come out, and then we'll plant corn on that crop. So one of the things that's it's as old as mankind itself is crop rotations, right, Larry?
Yeah.
And I think the ancient Egyptians, in the Nile Valley, I think, discovered crop rotation, and we're still using those techniques today, knowing that by rotating those crops on different fields, we're suppressing parasites and weeds and the nutrients that are in the soil, and so we're still doing that. Modern agriculture uses more complex ways of getting there, but we're still using those techniques that go way back to biblical times.
And Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but the vast majority of Wisconsin dairy farmers are growing their own feed, right?
Yes, certainly the forage. So forage is the long, shaggy feed that ruminants need, the salad bar, and so we're growing that on our farms, and then we'll also purchase supplements to balance that, to the previous caller, to balance what that cow needs. Every day we know what a cow needs: a certain amount of energy, protein, fiber, digestible fiber, bypass energy, and ruminants are complicated systems, but that's one of the things that makes the dairy cow such a blessing, is that she can take and consume and use feeds and foods that you and I can't digest. A ruminant can digest that, and a dairy cow then in turn, and then of course the sheep and the goats, they'll give us milk and meat and all the other great products. So yeah, they're really a marvel. One of the interesting things that a lot of people and callers might not know is livestock agriculture consumes a lot of what we call byproduct feeds or co-products from foods that humans eat. So when you think of it, everything we eat as humans has a rusk, a hind, a core, a peel, something before we get it on our dinner plate, right?
Yeah.
And when those processes are done in a facility, before we even get that bag of flour, before we even get that lemonade, those co-products ended up somewhere, and in many cases, those end up locally because, of course, there's a cost of hauling, and ruminants can digest those and make milk. So in our case, we use brewer's grain from Milwaukee. It comes from the brewery. It's the mash that's left after they start the beer making process. We will feed distillers' grains. We'll feed cottonseed. We'll feed malt sprouts, local things. I know farmers in the northern part of the state that will feed pizza crusts from a pizza factory that were rejects. If I were in California, I would feed almond hulls and citrus pulp.
Yeah.
And just on our farm alone, Crave Brothers Farm alone, just one dairy farm of the 6,000 in the state, we use over 10,000 tons a year of byproduct feeds. And It's very high nutrition. The cows benefit from it. Some of it they really like. And we'll mix it with our homegrown forages and homegrown corn, and we blend it up into a total mixed ration, and they consume that, and they get their nutritional needs.
Wow. Mark Crave, one of the founders of Crave Brothers Farmstead Cheese in Waterloo, and Ben Miller with us as well from the Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin. He's Vice President of Industry Relations. Questions, give a call at 800-642-1234. Email to talk@wpr.org. I'm Larry Mueller for WPR News. Taking a look at the dairy industry on the program today with Ben Miller from Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin and Mark Crave, one of the founders of Crave Brothers Farmstead Cheeses. Great to have them with us. Again, you can join 800-642-1234. Email to talk@wpr.org. Shirley in Green Bay emailed, did you see the recent feature film, Green and Gold? And if so, how did you feel about how small family farms were portrayed in that movie?
Yeah, I know it's gotten a lot of coverage. It's on my list. I haven't seen it, but Mark, have you seen it yet?
No, I haven't, and I meant to. I was wondering if someone would ask about it. No, I'm looking forward to seeing it though.
I interviewed the guys that put the movie together and watched it. It was a very, very interesting film, and really a lot of fun. And I know at least in Janesville, I think they had to extend the amount of time the film could be shown because there was a lot of interest.
That's great.
In it. Although the farm itself, it was plowing with a horse.
Yeah.
It was, a guy who had did not want to give up on the less mechanization, kind of the better.
Yeah, and that was also in the 90s, right? So that's a long time ago already, believe it or not. So yeah, when we certainly weren't farming with horses in the 90s either, though.
No, well, back even further back when I was a kid, and I was on a farm and grew up on a farm until into my teenage years, and we had back then we had milked 60 head of cattle. We also had chickens. We had some pigs, but the main was, and we had 320 acres. And that was considered, at least in our neighborhood in southern Wisconsin, to be a pretty big farm.
Yeah. I mean, 20 years ago, the average herd was 75. That's only 20 years ago. Not that long ago. And today, I think it's, 200 maybe?
I think it is around that, yes.
Yeah, that's the average size of the Wisconsin herd.
And the percentage of family farms in Wisconsin is still very...
99%.
Yeah, still in the high 90s, yeah. Family-owned.
Family-owned farms.
Yes.
99% of them in Wisconsin are family-owned. So there you go. And Rod called. He didn't want to stay, couldn't stay with us, but he just mentioned whey products, commonly used in drinks now. That's actually a waste product from milk creation, but a good idea because it's got a lot of protein.
It does, and actually it's used in more and more products all the time. And I mentioned earlier the Center for Dairy Research, that some of what they're doing is looking at ways to make better use of that whey. And also, the whey right off the cheese vat is a high concentration of liquid. So they're looking at ways to kind of reduce the amount of liquid so it's not so expensive to deal with. But it certainly adds a part to our milk check, the dried whey powders.
And to go along with something you mentioned earlier, Brenda called and also couldn't stay with us, but she was living in the Middle East years ago and went to the grocery store, and there was Wisconsin cheese.
Beautiful.
She remembers cheddar cheese was there. It was. She said it was expensive there, but she got it anyway.
That's great to hear.
Oh, man. Randy emailed us. Randy's recently been hearing a lot about raw milk. And do you have any comments or thoughts on raw milk? Some people think it's been improperly demonized. What exactly is the difference between organic and not organic milk? So we got raw milk and we got organic.
Yeah, I mean, let me start with raw milk, and I'll be pretty direct and clear on this. Now, not a good idea. pasteurization is something that for 100+ years we have taken for granted. And it's almost, Mark, you and I talked about this a few weeks ago. When something has been around that long, you sort of forget about it. It just sort of goes without saying. And I think about the benefits and the safety that it provides for us to have a really safe and nutritious product on our shelves. And we feed our families. But we do take it for granted, right, Mark? And this discussion around raw milk, I think, brings it back into focus about the importance of pasteurization and what it does and how dangerous raw milk can be. It can kill you. And we know of cases where people get really, really sick. Another interesting thing that we discovered was something like 70% of people who purchase raw milk will actually take it home and heat it before they consume it. We do that for you. So go ahead, Mark.
Well, and two things on that. As consumers, 50 or 100 years ago, people grew up with a whole different microbiome in their gut, right? Kids were playing outside. They were playing with pets. They were from bigger families. And they could maybe eat something that disagreed with them a little bit, but they didn't get sick from it. Now we live in such a sterile environment. We have handy wipes, we have wet wipes, we have hand sanitizers on every doorway, and so a lot of us don't have that microbiome in our gut to where if we did ingest a pathogen, we would probably get very sick instead of just maybe being under the weather for a few hours. The second part of that is I saw an interesting statistics, but only about 2% of foodborne illnesses are dairy related, but of those, 70% are linked to raw milk.
Oh.
So that's what the opposition from the dairy industry is towards raw milk is what we're doing with pasteurization makes milk dairy products extremely safe. But when we go to the raw milk version, then we're really opening up a lot of opportunity for things
problems.
To happen.
Colleen emailed us, how do you educate students to dairy farming as possible career choices?
That's great. Dairy farmers of Wisconsin, we take this part of our job very seriously and do a lot of on-farm. We partner with Mark and other farmers across the state with hosting students for tours, school groups that come through. June Dairy Month is, Larry, as you know, you go across the state, there are farm families hosting groups in every county across the state to educate and build awareness and visibility. And we partner with other organizations. This is not just a Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin opportunity, but for all of Wisconsin agriculture. There's so many programs, so many initiatives to get our youth interested in farming and careers that span, everything from on-farm vet service to you name it. But Mark, maybe you want to talk a little bit about your engagement with youth.
Well, right, and as Ben said, there's a lot of jobs that are linked to the dairy industry that aren't on the farm, and with any career. Larry, you were sharing us your background in radio. Oftentimes, it's just an opportunity for a young person, and to have the right opportunity, not just work, not just hey, go do that, but engagement from the farmer. Make it a pleasant experience. Make it interesting. Share the bigger picture. And my own father, who's no longer with us, grew up in town. Grew up in Beloit, and got a job on the outskirts of town, rode his bike, and worked on a very, very progressive farm at that time, and just loved it. And ended up, when he graduated from high school, came to the University of Wisconsin here, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
So it can happen.
Amazing story for your whole family. I did want to mention that we're going to have another Crave coming and visiting us. Carl is your nephew.
We're a big family, so you'll find us all over the place.
And he is Vice President of Operation for Dynamic Renewables, which is a company that specializes in recycling manure from dairy farms. Mm-hmm. And so that'll be coming up next week on Wednesday. So looking forward to talking with him. And hey, it's been fun talking with you guys.
It's great to see you, Larry.
Thanks
for having us.
Thanks so much. Ben Miller, Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin Vice President of Industry Relations, and Mark Crave, one of the founders of Crave Brothers Farmstead Cheese. Great to have them with us. And look forward to another time visiting with them. Tomorrow on Garden Talk, we'll cover garden design trends. We'll look at how to grow potatoes. And we'll also talk about soil health. That's all starting at 11 tomorrow on Garden Talk. And, of course, thanks for joining us today. This and other shows are a team effort. For this show, our producers are Clara Neipert and Joel Patnod. Our technical directors are Lee Rayburn and Jeff Robbins. And our executive producer is Jill Nadeau. I'm Larry Mueller. Thank you so much for listening, and stay with us. Lots more in store here on WPR News.